Welcome, beautiful people. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to the podcast, Touch One Life, Touch Millions with Dr. Eve. Welcome to new subscribers and old subscribers. You are welcome. We are delving into writing our history. So it's been quite a journey these last few days. Today is the 8th day of February, in the month of Black History. And I am on a journey, and I hope that you are too. At the top of the month, we talked about uh, the importance of documenting our history um, in honor of Black History Month. Why? Because the day you were born, you entered into a moment in Black history. And so I'm excited to walk this journey. I am excited to take this journey with you because there's healing in this journey. There is love in this journey. There is clarity in this journey. There is writing. There is uh, sometimes smiling, sometimes sad. There's emotions in this journey. And I'm loving the process, and I hope that you are too. The question for today was describe using all five senses your childhood home. That's the prompt for today. Describe using all five senses your childhood home. And if you moved around a lot, describe the one you remember best. So I took a moment and I jotted some things down because it's good. It's good to journal. It's good to, write about what you seen, you heard, you felt, you um smelled, right? All the senses. Imagine that, right? So I wrote down some things, right? Home was a place of love, a place where there was so much camaraderie. There were big rooms and small rooms, and um, my daddy was a builder, so we had a very nice home. White paneling, carpeting, um, furniture, just beautiful place, just carpeting with plastic runners. Any of y'all remember the plastic runners? I still use plastic runners in some places in my house because the traffic zones, they were in the high traffic zones, to keep from wearing and tearing on the carpet. And when you got little munchkins everywhere, that was kind of important because my daddy was a stickler about cleanliness. So we had these plastic runners and furniture that was covered with plastic. Anybody remember the plastic on the furniture? Well, there were six of us. So there actually eight of us, because if you include my parents, and of course there was nine of us because there was my grandmother. So you see, with all those people in the house, my daddy and my mama was trying to really preserve, the furniture with all the children in the house, six of us and our friends. Imagine that, six children and their friends. So, but on those cold days, on those cold days, or even on those cold days, that plastic was cold. On those warm days, that plastic was hot. It was made you sweat. When you move around, you always felt like the plastic was moving with you. Like it was firm, but you could hear it. Like it was plastic, like plastic covered. Y'all remember that? Anyone remember that? But it beat every single spill screams. My daddy screaming about us eating in the living room or spilling something on the carpet. There was always a layer of protection that he would put in place, to minimize that. Um, but even then, we would sit around in there every now and again. Most of the time, we were passing through, unless we had company. Now, if we had company, then the living room was the palace. There was the living room with all that beautiful furniture. And of course, we had a big old piano, which I played piano, so that we were a musical home. So there was always sounds bellowing out of our home because we played instruments. And then there was the dining room, of course. We passed through that because that was the place that was fit for a king and a queen. And us children, we weren't really allowed in there unless it was a big holiday, like Christmas and Thanksgiving, where we would all come together with our family members. So, of course, with my mama, loved to cook, but my grandmother brought that heat. She brought that heat to the kitchen. There was always something special cooking, and especially on Sundays, a meal down home Southern meal. Now, at the time, I didn't know the difference between a Northern and a Southern meal, but my grandmother brought them collard greens and them ham hocks and them lima beans and rice and that chicken, stewed chicken with the backs and the racks. And that good old macaroni and cheese, and her turnips always had those oh my goodness, what do you call those dumplings? The dumplings. She was always cooking something special. And don't let us not forget those biscuits, because there was always a cake. Grandma loved to bake. So there was always cakes and cookies and, bake things. Baby, she would make those homemade biscuits. And I tried it for the first time once, and they turned out like bricks. I missed a step somewhere along the line, but I still don't bake to the day because of that, because I think I was traumatized. I was traumatized by them biscuits. Grandma threw that biscuit and it was hard as I don't know what, and she just shooed me out the kitchen. I think she should have kept me in the kitchen because I still don't bake. But there were many things I remember, including again those turnips, which with those dumplings, and the amazing way she used cornstarch to make homemade gravy, or she would a thickening, the way she would use that cornstarch to thicken even chicken dishes or turkey dishes and make that good old gravy out of her stew mixture, seasoning and watering mixture, juices from her baked goods. She would use that gravy, and as we crowded around the kitchen table for dinner, right, because there was the sound of children everywhere, because at dinner time they would go to the door and they would ring the dinner bell. There was a dinner bell that was always in our china cabinet, and we could hear that dinner bell a mile away, because we were probably either down the street playing on down the street somewhere on the porch playing jacks with our friends, jumping rope or hopscotch, and we were or either on the back playing handball or something, but we could hear that bell. It was a big old bell, big old dinner bell. I still remember it. I have a smaller one in my china cabinet, and it's made of glass, and it is really symbolic of what I remember, the big dinner bell that my parents had to summons us to dinner, because we were scattered out there somewhere, because children today, they sit in the house, but we weren't house sitters. We were outside, we were playing and making friends and all kinds of things. So there was the sound of children everywhere, bickering about this and bickering about that. Imagine that, 6 children in the house, ranging from the age of God, let's say six to so 1969, 1962 to 1969, my mother had children. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, it sounds about right. She had all three of us within 2 years. So we had some stair steps going on. But we was always bickering about this or bickering about that. There was always, afternoons filled with homework. There were television, there were games, there were things we played, there was one thing after another. There were six of us, including our instruments, because we had to practice every day. You had my brother on the bass, me on the piano, my sometimes there was a flute, my sister on the flute, my other sister on the bongos, my brother on the drums, like the Jackson Five. Yeah, my daddy was really like hoping we was gonna be the Jackson Five. He was really stuck on that thing. So there was all these sounds all the time, except of course my baby sisters who didn't have care, had one solid care about anything in the world except skateboarding, and my other sister who was always hurling every foul or profanity word she could remember my father saying. But and again, there was the dining room, like I said, which was off limits because of, it was a space made for a king and a queen. It really was, y'all. And always the first I was always the first person at the table and the last to leave, because there was always something on my plate that I didn't want, right? Even though I love my grandmother's cooking, but there was always something on that plate that I did not want. And I didn't, my mama, got it right most days, realizing that we were kids, and she made kid-friendly meals. Kid-friendly meals was on deck, and I love those kinds of meals. Um, we always had a space. We always had a space we could call our own. There was the basement, because we lived in a three-story home in Philadelphia. This is by this time my parents had bought a home. And so in the basement, we had it laid out. My daddy laid that out. We had pool table. We had, the booths that you have at the restaurant. We had, I don't know where in the world he found these, but he found booths like you have at the booths, dining booths. Dining booths were in the cellar. cellar. We had strobe lights and our own personal DJ, because my brother just absolutely loved music and bass guitar. So that's where most of the time we played, did our rehearsals and things like that. Of course, I did my rehearsals upstairs because I was always on the piano. But my brothers played the drums and the bass and all those things. My other brother played the trumpet. Yeah, he played the trumpet, and he was really good at that. And so there was a lot going on. So on Sundays there was big old meals. On Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays and Thursdays there were a gathering of children scurrying off to school. Afternoons filled with homework and getting that house clean before our mother got home. And of course, there were evenings with my mom, because our dad was a brick mason, so he was always coming in at sundown. So my mother cared for the home, but there was always, baths at 7, 8, 9 o'clock, and then there was always an opportunity to go to the ice cream parlors. They would get us ready in our PJs, and we'd have a night in the wagon. We had one of those what do you call those wagons? You know, a vehicle. It was a Volkswagen. Was it a Volkswagen? Yeah, a Volkswagen. And off to the ice cream parlor we went in our PJs. Beautiful nights. And then there were Fridays, which were always our fish days, right? Fish, grandma fried fish. That was fried fish, and fried fish and a lot of camaraderie because the neighbors were always out, children was always out, people was always out. There was juke joints always jumping. There was always something going on the block. And then there were Saturdays and Sundays, but then there were summers and springs and winters and falls. So, when I think about these times and when I even think of home, when I think of the five senses of a home, I can't go without describing that in the way of summers and with spring and winter and fall, because there were different things going on, even in those seasons, right? There were things like, again, the ice cream parlor in the summers, and in the spring were flowers and gardening and, and the birds, birds and street sweeping, cleaning and block parties and all those things. Um, and then there were cold winters where there were, or falls where the light, the days were getting shorter. And then the rainy days in the spring, right before spring, and then, the winters, which were full of snow. It snowed 9 months out of the year, so there was always some snow. From fall to winter and sometimes spring, depending on, where you live. And we lived in the city, so it was a lot of snow. So on snow days, there was shoveling, there was, lots of snow, lots of cocoa and warm heat and indoor playing. And, eventually all things come to an end. And even describing all of that in our childhood home, using all the things to answer this question, the sun set on those days. The sun set on those days when my parents decided to part ways. That changed the entire landscape of the home. It's good to look back on these moments to remember, right? To remember what was, to remember how the transitions and the seasons, even at home, because there was, when our parents separated, our home life began to change. It began to change. Mother was out working, we were older. Eventually, there were other things that came into play. There was growing teens. There was a lot of things that were changing in our home. There were addictions. There were alcoholism. There was a lot going on, as we grew up as teenagers. And then our home began to change. Our mother became sick, and we became more impoverished. We went from a life of, we didn't know what happened actually, how privileged, we didn't know how privileged we were until we didn't have it anymore. And then what is this life that we're living, And so there came a time when the sun set on all those things that I've described in the aforementioned. And there were days where there weren't hot water. There was no longer meals, the smell of meals bellowing out of the kitchen. My grandmother was no longer there, or was she? No, she was off on her own. There were now smells of kerosene fumes and darkness over the home. So there was a lot. There was a lot to think about in this question, and I'm honored to be able to visit this and to remember and to thank God for His grace and His mercy, and how He allowed me to transition even from there to marry a wonderful man, to have home of our own. We could build together. Because when I met him, I was in that home that had taken so many hits. It had taken so many hits. And my dad was trying to keep it up, but there were municipal things, there were tax issues, there were water bill issues, there were just things that were in the way. They maintained, we still have that home. We still have it, it's their property. But not like it was, not like the days of old. But things change, right? We go through seasons and we learn from them. And the reason why it's so important in this moment for us to reflect on those times is because we have power. We have the power to decide what we want out of life. We have the power to decide. Even in the moment when I think about my parents, I think about them going from being together, never being married to, I get to decide whether I want to be married. I get to decide what I want, what part of that life, what part of that childhood home, what part of those things I want and don't want anymore. And I get to choose. I get to the free will to choose something different. And so reflecting is important. Again, this took me down memory lane. I have written a book called Preparing for Your Season of Elevation, where I actually talked about, some of the life at home with my dad and him, and this dream of the Jackson Six, the Heinz Six. But what I hadn't done was added or describe, use the story in a way to describe what was really good, and so this is a lesson even in writing, that there's always something good. Always find the good in everything. There's always something good in everything. So this has taken me back a few notches and allowing me to revisit that story and to, again, continue to reflect in a way that you, my audience, and can build and do deep analysis and have discussions about, what was going on. You can actually have a familiar conversation with your sisters and your brothers and sit down and have a conversation about how would they describe it. Like, this is the great way to have family discussions. If your family is far away, get on a Zoom and ask the question and see, begin a conversation with your family that you all can begin to talk about and talk through some of the things that you remember about home using your 5 senses. So thank you for participating with me today. The next question for tomorrow is going to be, what role did you play in your family's dynamic? Wow, this is good. What role did you play in your family's dynamic? Were you the peacekeeper, the comedian, the youngest, the oldest, the troublemaker? Tell a story that demonstrates you playing that role. Tell a story that demonstrates you playing that role. So for all of you out there who are participating in this challenge with me to write your story, so that you can lean into how to Uber pick people up in a story, and drop them off, pick them up and drop them off, pick them up, drop them off, and attract your audience in ways that you could never imagine, because your story is so important. You are listening to Dr. Eve on the podcast, Touch One Life, Touch Millions. And thank you to my special guests, you, and you, for joining me, my new subscribers and all old subscribers. You are welcome to continue on this journey with me as we write our history. Peace and blessings to you all, and may you have the most amazing day. And whatever you do, let no one get